Can you imagine someone you love, someone who practically raised you, looking you in the eye and lying about having cancer? Not just for money, but to fund their Hawaiian vacation? And then, when you finally confront them, they just smirk and say, "Mental health is medical, so technically I didn't lie." What the hell would you do next? This happened to me. And it all started 11 months ago. This morning, I actually got a text from her, a digital receipt for $500, with a note that just said, "I took a third job. I owe her that much." Her meaning my grandmother, who Linda also scammed. But let's back up. My Aunt Linda. I always thought she was the responsible one, you know? The rock of our family. A nurse, always had her finances perfectly in order. Never asked anyone for anything. So when she called me, her voice ragged with sobs, begging for money for unexpected medical bills, I didn't hesitate. I should have. Aunt Linda wasn't just an aunt. She was like a second mom. When my parents were going through their messy divorce, she was the one who picked me up from school, made sure I had dinner. She helped me with college applications, even co-signed my first apartment lease. She was always there. So when she called needing me, there was no question. The call came on a Tuesday night in March. Linda was so distraught, so choked up, I could barely understand her at first. She'd gone to the doctor for what she thought was just a persistent cough, but they'd found something concerning on her chest X-ray. The follow-up tests, the specialist appointments, the procedures, they weren't fully covered by her insurance. She was looking at almost $6,000 in out-of-pocket expenses. She sounded so embarrassed to even ask, saying how independent she'd always been. But this, she explained, had wiped out her emergency fund, maxed out her credit cards. She promised she'd pay me back as soon as she could pick up overtime again. Right now, she said, she could barely function with the stress. I had been saving up for a new car. My old one was on its last legs. But this was family. This was Linda. Within the hour, I transferred $5,000 to her account. That was my car money. My freedom. And I just gave it away, no questions asked, because it was Linda. She was so grateful she started crying again, telling me I was saving her life. She swore she'd never forget what I did for her. For the next few weeks, she kept me updated. The tests were taking longer than expected, she'd say. Doctors wanted more scans. She was exhausted from all the medical visits but trying to stay positive. I checked in on her constantly, sent care packages, even offered to drive her to appointments. But she always insisted she was managing. Then about a month later, I was scrolling through Facebook during my lunch break. And I saw something that made my blood run cold. Linda had posted a photo. Herself on a beach holding a tropical drink. The caption read, "Much needed vacation vibes. Sometimes you just have to treat yourself." The hashtags? Hashtag Hawaii, hashtag Aloha Life, hashtag blessed. At first, my brain tried to make sense of it. Maybe an old photo? Maybe she'd recovered faster than expected. And her doctor had ordered a relaxing trip? I scrolled through more recent posts. Sunset photos from Maui. Pictures of her at expensive restaurants. Videos of her snorkeling and hiking. All posted over the past week. That evening I called her, trying to keep my voice casual. I asked how she was feeling, mentioned I'd seen her Hawaii photos. There was this long, awkward pause before she laughed nervously. She was feeling much better, she said. Her doctor had actually recommended she de-stress. The medical bills were all taken care of, apparently. And she'd gotten a great last-minute deal on the trip. Something felt off, really off, but I tried to give her the benefit of the doubt. Maybe insurance covered more than she thought. Maybe she used credit cards for the trip. But then I made the mistake of looking at the timestamps on her posts more carefully. Her first Hawaii photo was posted the same day she called me asking for money for medical bills. I spent the next few days doing some detective work I'm still not proud of. But I had to know. I called the medical office she'd mentioned, asked about scheduling an appointment. They'd never heard of Linda Morrison. I checked with 2 other specialists in town. Nothing. I even drove by her house and noticed her mail was piling up, which explained why she hadn't been answering my calls about her recovery. When she finally called me back 3 days later, she was still in Hawaii. I could hear waves in the background. She just casually said she was calling to check in. Let me know she was doing great. That's when I asked her directly about the medical bills. Which doctor? The silence stretched on. I thought the call had dropped. Finally, she sighed and said we should probably talk when she got back. But I didn't want to wait. I told her I knew there were no medical bills, no doctor visits, no insurance problems. I knew she'd used my money to fund her vacation while lying to my face. Her excuse was even worse than I'd imagined. She said she'd been feeling stressed, burned out from work. She knew if she'd just asked for vacation money, I would have said no. So she convinced herself that mental health is medical health, and technically she wasn't lying. She'd planned to pay me back from her tax refund, she said. So what was the harm in bending the truth a little? I was furious. But what really twisted the knife was when she tried to make me feel guilty for being upset. She reminded me of everything she'd done for me over the years, how she'd always been there. This was my chance to return the favor. She said I was being selfish. That family should support each other without keeping score. That conversation changed everything. But Linda had no idea that her little Hawaiian adventure was about to cost her way more than $5,000. I wasn't just some naive nephew she could manipulate. I'd learned a few things about family loyalty over the years, and I was about to teach her a lesson about what happens when you mistake someone's love for stupidity. What I did next didn't just get my money back. It made sure she'd never be able to pull this kind of stunt on anyone in our family ever again. First thing, I screenshotted everything. Everything. Every Hawaii post, every restaurant check-in, every sunset selfie with the timestamps clearly visible. I even found the resort she was staying at by zooming in on a poolside photo where you could see the hotel logo on a towel. A quick search showed rooms were going for $400 a night minimum. I sat at my kitchen table that night, laptop open, going through her social media history like a detective. And what I found, it made my stomach turn. This wasn't the first time. 6 months ago, she'd posted about car troubles, needing repairs. 2 weeks later, spa weekend in Sedona. A year before that, she'd asked her church group for help with a flooded basement, then posted photos from a cruise. My hands were shaking as I created a folder on my desktop. Evidence. I wasn't just angry about my money anymore. I was angry for everyone she'd scammed. But I knew confronting her directly wouldn't work. She'd already shown she could twist things, make herself the victim. I needed to be smarter. The next morning I called my cousin Marcus. He and Linda had always been close. I knew he'd given her money before when she claimed her hours got cut at the hospital. I asked him casually if he'd heard from her lately, mentioned I was worried because she'd been sick. Marcus went quiet. Then he told me Linda had called him last month, asking for $2,000 for car repairs. He'd sent it immediately because, well, it was Linda. She'd practically raised them both after his mom died. But now that I mentioned it, he'd seen her Hawaii posts too, and it had been bugging him. We spent the next hour comparing notes. The stories she told us were different but followed the same pattern. Always a crisis, always just enough details to sound legitimate, always a promise to pay it back soon. Marcus remembered our other cousin, Kesha, mentioning something about lending Linda money for a dental emergency last Christmas. Called Kesha next. Sure enough, Linda had gotten $1,500 from her for a root canal she never got. Kesha had been too embarrassed to bring it up at family gatherings, figured Linda must have had her reasons. That's when I realized. Linda had been counting on our family's tendency to avoid confrontation, to not talk about money, to give her the benefit of the doubt. By the end of the day, I'd talked to 6 family members. The total Linda had scammed from us? Over $15,000. My Uncle Ray had given her $3,000 for a new furnace. My grandmother had sent $1,000 for medical bills twice. Even my broke college student sister had Venmoed her $200 for groceries when Linda claimed her identity was stolen and accounts were frozen. I created a group text with everyone except Linda. The responses ranged from shock to anger to deep embarrassment. My grandmother was devastated. She lived on a fixed income, and that $2,000 had come from her savings. Uncle Ray was furious. He'd had to put off his own home repairs to help Linda with hers. We agreed to confront her together when she got back from Hawaii. But Linda must have sensed something was up because suddenly her post stopped. Then Marcus got a text from her saying she'd had to extend her trip for a family emergency with a friend who lived on the island. Classic Linda. Always another story. That's when I decided we couldn't wait. I found the resort's Facebook page and left a public comment on one of their posts. My Aunt Linda Morrison is currently staying at your hotel using money she stole from our family by faking medical emergencies. She scammed her own elderly mother, her nephews and nieces out of thousands of dollars. I hope she's enjoying her stay, because it's the last vacation she'll be taking on our dime. Within an hour my phone was blowing up. Linda was calling, texting, leaving voicemails. I didn't answer. Instead, I posted on my own Facebook, tagging all our mutual family members. PSA. If Linda Morrison asks you for money for any emergency, medical or otherwise, please know she's currently in Hawaii spending the $5,000 I gave her for fake cancer treatments. Don't make the same mistake I did. The post went viral within our extended family network. Cousins I hadn't talked to in years were commenting, sharing their own experiences with Linda. Turns out her scams went back further than any of us knew. She'd been doing this for at least 5 years, hitting up different family members with different stories, always careful not to ask the same person twice in a row. Linda tried damage control from Hawaii. She posted a long, rambling explanation about being under so much stress, how she'd meant to tell everyone the truth, how she was planning to pay everyone back with her tax refund, her bonus, her lottery winnings, whatever sounded good in the moment. But the more she posted, the deeper the hole she dug. Then she made a crucial mistake. She tried to turn it around on me, posting about how I was ruining her reputation over a misunderstanding, and how family should handle things privately. She even suggested I was lying about the amount, that it was really just $1,000 and I was exaggerating for attention. That's when I played my ace. I posted screenshots of our text conversations, the bank transfer receipt, her tearful voicemails about medical bills. Everything. I laid out a timeline showing how she'd called me about cancer treatments the same day she booked her Hawaii flight. The evidence was undeniable. The family group chat turned into a war room. We discovered Linda had patterns. She always struck when people were distracted. During holidays, after family crises, when emotions were high. She kept a mental spreadsheet of who she'd hit up and when, careful to space out her requests. She knew exactly how much to ask for, never too much to raise suspicion, always just enough to seem reasonable. My cousin Destiny, who worked in IT, did some digging and found Linda's Venmo history was public. We could see the exact dates she'd received money from family members and the dates she'd paid for vacation expenses. The overlap was damning. She'd literally used my uncle's furnace money to pay for surfing lessons. As more family members came forward, we realized Linda had been living entirely off our money for months. Her nursing job? She'd been fired 6 months ago for calling in sick too often, probably because she was too busy planning her scams. She'd been paying her rent with our grandmother's money, buying groceries with Kesha's dental emergency funds, making her car payment with Marcus' loan. The group decided we needed to take action before she found new victims. We couldn't go to the police. Most of us had willingly given her the money, and proving fraud would be complicated. But we could make sure she faced consequences within the family, the community she'd exploited. First, we contacted her landlord. Not to get her evicted, but to let him know that if Linda came to him with any emergency repair needs or sob stories, he should verify with us first. We did the same with the few mutual friends she had left, warning them about her patterns. It wasn't about ruining her life. It was about protecting others. Then came the family meeting. We scheduled it for the day after Linda was supposed to return from Hawaii. She tried to skip it, claiming she was sick, but my Uncle Ray told her if she didn't show up, he'd drive to her apartment and have the conversation on her doorstep where all her neighbors could hear. She showed up looking tanned and guilty. The meeting was held at my grandmother's house, and seeing Linda walk in with her fresh manicure and Hawaii tan, while my grandmother sat there in the same worn dress she'd been wearing for years, it made my blood boil. We'd agreed beforehand to stay calm, to let her speak first. Linda started with tears, talking about her struggles, her mental health, how she'd never meant for things to go so far. She pulled out all the manipulation tactics, trying to divide us, suggesting some family members had given her gifts. Not loans, that we were misremembering conversations. But we were prepared. Destiny had created a spreadsheet showing every transaction, every story, every lie. When Linda tried to claim the money from my grandmother was a birthday gift, we showed her the text where she'd promised to pay it back within a month. When she said Marcus had offered to help with no strings attached, we played the voicemail where she'd begged him for a loan. The turning point came when my quiet, gentle grandmother stood up and looked Linda straight in the eye. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. She just said, her voice trembling slightly, "I raised you better than this, Linda. I went without medication last month because I gave you my money. How do you sleep at night?" Linda broke down then. But it wasn't real remorse. It was the panic of someone who'd been caught and couldn't talk her way out. She made wild promises about payment plans, getting a second job, selling her car. But we'd heard it all before. That's when I revealed the final piece. I'd contacted a lawyer friend who'd drawn up a formal repayment agreement. It laid out exactly how much Linda owed each family member, with a payment schedule and consequences for default. The consequences weren't legal. They were social. If Linda failed to make payments, we'd share her story with her nursing board, her new employer when she found one, and any community group she tried to join. Some family members thought it was too harsh. But I reminded them of my grandmother going without medication, of my sister eating ramen for weeks after helping Linda, of all the sacrifices we'd made for someone who'd been laughing at us from a beach in Maui. Linda signed the agreement. What choice did she have? Her reputation in the family was destroyed, but at least this gave her a path to redemption. The first payment was due in 2 weeks, $500 to be split among those she owed. She made that first payment and the second. By the third month she was working 2 jobs, had sold her designer bags and jewelry. She moved to a smaller apartment, got rid of her car lease for an older model. Every payment came with a note about how sorry she was, how she was getting therapy, how she'd never forgive herself. I wanted to believe her. But trust, once broken like that, it doesn't come back easily. Family gatherings were awkward now. Linda would show up quiet and subdued. Nothing like the confident aunt who'd helped raise us. Some family members had forgiven her. Others barely acknowledged her presence. As for me, I got my money back eventually. It took 8 months of payments, but she paid every cent. I even bought my new car. Though honestly, every time I drove it, I thought about how that money had taken a detour through Hawaii first. The real victory wasn't the money, though. It was knowing that Linda's days of exploiting family were over. Word had spread through our extended network, and even distant relatives knew not to fall for her stories. She'd lost something more valuable than the money she'd stolen: the trust and respect of the people who'd loved her most. Sometimes I wonder if we were too harsh, if we should have handled it differently. But then I remember my grandmother's face when she realized the woman she'd raised had stolen from her. I remember my sister skipping meals, Marcus working overtime to cover the money he'd sent Linda. All of us sacrificing for someone who saw us as nothing more than ATMs. Linda learned that when you betray family, when you take advantage of love and trust, the consequences go far beyond money. She got her Hawaiian vacation, but it cost her everything that actually mattered. And in the end, that $5,000 vacation became the most expensive trip she ever took. The weeks following our family meeting were tense. Linda made her payments on time, but something was brewing beneath the surface. I first noticed it when my cousin Kesha called me one evening, sounding utterly confused. "Did you tell Linda I was spreading rumors about her at work?" she asked. I hadn't talked to Linda since the meeting. Kesha explained that Linda had texted her, claiming I'd been telling people at the hospital where Kesha worked that she was also a scammer. It was completely fabricated. But the seed of doubt had been planted. Over the next few days, similar calls came in. Linda had contacted Marcus, suggesting I was trying to turn the family against her because I was jealous of her relationship with our grandmother. She told Uncle Ray that I was planning to sue her, despite our agreement explicitly avoiding legal action. Each family member received a slightly different story, all designed to paint me as the vindictive nephew who'd blown things out of proportion. I realized Linda wasn't going down without a fight. She was using the same manipulation tactics that had worked for years, trying to divide us, trying to make us question each other instead of her. But this time we were prepared. I called an emergency family video chat, carefully excluding Linda. As we compared notes, a pattern emerged. She was targeting those who'd been most sympathetic to her at the meeting, trying to rebuild alliances. She'd even contacted my grandmother, crying about how I was being cruel and unforgiving, how she'd made one mistake, and I was ruining her life over it. My grandmother, bless her heart, had recorded the call. We listened as Linda spun tale after tale, conveniently forgetting to mention the years of deception, the multiple victims, the calculated nature of her scams. She painted herself as a victim of a momentary lapse in judgment, persecuted by a vengeful nephew. We decided to maintain a united front. Anyone who received a call or message from Linda would immediately share it with the group. We wouldn't engage with her attempts to divide us. But Linda was craftier than we'd anticipated. 2 weeks later, I got a call from my employer. Someone had sent an anonymous email claiming I'd been embezzling money from the company. The accusations were vague, but serious enough that HR had to investigate. I spent 3 days in meetings providing documentation, explaining the situation. Eventually, they determined the claims were baseless, but the stress and embarrassment were real. I couldn't prove it was Linda, but the timing was deeply suspicious. When I mentioned it to the family group, others shared similar experiences. Marcus had received a warning from his landlord about noise complaints he'd never had before. Kesha's car had been keyed in her work parking lot. Uncle Ray's neighbors suddenly started complaining about his dog, who'd lived there peacefully for 5 years. It was psychological warfare. Linda couldn't attack us directly without violating our agreement, so she was trying to destabilize our lives in small, unprovable ways. The family was divided on how to respond. Some wanted to confront her. Others thought we were being paranoid. Maybe these were just coincidences. Then Linda made her next move. She started attending a different church, one where our extended family members went, but our immediate family didn't. Within weeks, she'd integrated herself into their community, playing the role of the reformed sinner, seeking redemption. She gave testimonies about her struggles with mental health, how her family had turned against her during her darkest hour. My cousin Destiny, who attended that church, reported back. Linda was carefully crafting a narrative where she was the victim of a misunderstanding, blown out of proportion by a vindictive family. She never mentioned the Hawaii trip, the years of scams, or the $15,000 she'd stolen. Instead, she talked about making a single mistake during a mental health crisis and being ostracized by her family. The church community rallied around her. Soon we started getting calls from distant relatives and family friends, asking why we were being so harsh on poor Linda. She'd managed to create a whole new support system. People who only knew her version of events. I wanted to set the record straight, but my grandmother advised patience. Give her enough rope, she said, and she'll hang herself. Grandma had learned from experience that Linda's patterns would eventually surface. Sure enough, within a month, Linda had started asking her new church friends for small favors. Could someone give her a ride to work because her car was in the shop? Could she borrow $20 for gas until payday? Small requests that seemed reasonable, especially for someone portrayed as struggling to rebuild her life. But I knew Linda's playbook. Start small, build trust, then escalate. I felt responsible for these potential new victims, but warning them might backfire, making us look like the vindictive family Linda had described. The situation escalated when Linda missed her 4th payment. According to our agreement, she owed $500 to be split among family members. When the due date passed, I sent her a single text reminding her of the deadline. Her response was calculated. She replied to the family group chat, not just me, with a long message about how she'd been trying her best, but had faced unexpected expenses. Her car had broken down again. She'd had to miss work for a medical emergency, unspecified, and her hours had been cut. She begged for understanding, promised to make it up next month with a double payment. The family was split. Some wanted to give her another chance. Others were tired of the excuses. I noticed she'd sent the message on a Friday evening, when emotions were high and people were tired from the work week. Classic Linda timing. I did some investigating. Her social media had been scrubbed clean of anything incriminating, but I'd learned to dig deeper. Her car that was supposedly broken down? I'd seen it in the church parking lot that Sunday running fine. The medical emergency? Destiny confirmed Linda had been at church activities all week. The cut hours? I called the restaurant where she worked, pretending to be confirming a reference, and learned she'd actually picked up extra shifts. When I presented this information to the family, the mood shifted. Even those who'd wanted to give her another chance realized she was falling back into old patterns. We decided to implement the consequences outlined in our agreement. I drafted a letter to her employer, a simple statement of facts about the money she owed family members and her pattern of deception. We didn't send it yet, but we let Linda know it was ready. The threat alone should have been enough to motivate payment. Instead, Linda went nuclear. She showed up at my apartment unannounced on a Tuesday evening. I saw her through the peephole and almost didn't answer, but I figured avoiding her would only escalate things. She came in tears, but not the manipulative tears from before. These seemed different. Desperate. She begged me to reconsider. Said losing her job would destroy any chance she had of paying us back. When I remained firm, reminding her that she'd brought this on herself, her demeanor changed. The tears stopped abruptly. She stood up, looked me straight in the eye and said, her voice low and dangerous, "You have no idea what I'm capable of when cornered. Back off or you'll regret it." It was a threat. Plain and simple. The mask had finally slipped completely. I told her to leave. And she did, but not before adding, "You think you won, but this isn't over." I immediately informed the family group. Some were alarmed. Others thought she was just posturing. But I'd seen something in her eyes that worried me. This wasn't the aunt who'd helped raise me. This was someone I didn't recognize. Over the next week, strange things started happening. My credit card was used for several online purchases I hadn't made. My social media accounts were accessed from unknown locations. Someone had signed me up for dozens of spam email lists and questionable websites. It was harassment, but subtle enough to be hard to prove. Other family members experienced similar issues. Marcus found his dating profile had been altered with offensive content. Kesha's work email was spammed with inappropriate messages that looked like they'd come from her account. Uncle Ray's Facebook was hacked and used to send friend requests to hundreds of strangers. We knew it was Linda, but proving it? That was another matter. She'd gotten savvier, probably learning from online tutorials how to cover her digital tracks. The family was frustrated and scared. Some wanted to go to the police, but what would we say? That we suspected our aunt of cyber harassment because we'd caught her stealing? Then Linda played what she thought was her trump card. She contacted my parents, who'd been living across the country and somewhat removed from the situation. She fed them a sob story about how I'd turned the family against her over a misunderstanding, how I was ruining her life out of spite. My parents, who'd been dealing with their own issues since their divorce, were suddenly thrust into the middle of this mess. My mom called me, confused and concerned. My dad sent angry texts about family loyalty. Linda had found a weak spot and was exploiting it. I spent hours on the phone with each parent, explaining the full situation, sending them documentation. It was exhausting, reliving the whole ordeal, defending actions I'd taken to protect our family. Eventually they understood, but the damage to our already fragile relationship was done. The stress was affecting everyone. Kesha was having anxiety attacks about her work situation. Marcus was paranoid about what Linda might do next. My grandmother had stopped sleeping well, worried about the family being torn apart. The victory we'd felt at exposing Linda's scams had turned into a prolonged battle none of us had signed up for. That's when I realized we'd been playing defense, reacting to Linda's moves instead of taking control. If she wanted to escalate, we needed to be smarter, not harsher. I consulted with a friend who worked in cybersecurity. He helped us lock down our digital presence, showed us how to document the harassment properly, and gave us tools to protect ourselves. We created new email accounts, strengthened our passwords, and learned to recognize phishing attempts. More importantly, we decided to stop engaging with Linda's provocations. When she sent manipulative messages, we didn't respond. When she tried to divide us, we shared everything with the group. When she played victim at church, we let her, knowing her true nature would eventually show. The turning point came 3 weeks later. Linda had continued attending the church, building her support network, but she'd also started dating someone from the congregation. Tom. He was a kind, trusting man who'd lost his wife 2 years earlier. He was exactly Linda's type. Vulnerable, financially stable, and eager to help. Destiny overheard Linda telling Tom about her struggles, how her family had abandoned her, how she was facing eviction because she'd helped family members who then turned on her. It was our stories reversed, with her as the victim and us as the scammers. I struggled with whether to warn Tom. Interfering might backfire. making us look like the vindictive family Linda described. But standing by while she found a new victim felt wrong. The decision was made for us when Tom approached Destiny at church, asking about Linda's situation. He was considering lending her money for rent and wanted to know if the family issues were as bad as Linda described. Destiny, caught off guard, suggested he talk to other family members before making any decisions. Tom, being a decent person, took that advice. He reached out to me through Facebook, politely asking for my perspective on Linda's situation. I could have unloaded everything, but instead, I simply suggested he ask Linda for specifics about who she'd helped and when. Then, I told him he should verify those stories independently. That conversation must have planted seeds of doubt, because Tom started asking Linda questions. She tried her usual tactics: tears, emotional manipulation. But Tom was methodical. He wanted names, dates, amounts. The more he pressed, the more her story unraveled. When Tom discovered the truth, he didn't just end their relationship. He felt obligated to warn others at the church. Word spread quickly through their community about Linda's real history. The support system she carefully built crumbled within days. Linda's response was predictable, but no less disturbing. She sent a group message to the family, blaming us for ruining her chance at happiness, claiming we'd sabotaged her relationship out of spite. She threatened legal action for defamation, harassment, and emotional distress. We knew the threats were empty. She had no case. But the fact that she was still trying to intimidate us after everything showed how deep her manipulation ran. Some family members wanted to respond to defend ourselves, but I advocated for silence. Let her rage into the void. But Linda wasn't done. If she couldn't rebuild her life within our community, she'd try elsewhere. She started applying for jobs in neighboring towns, using references who didn't know about her history. She joined online support groups for people estranged from their families, painting herself as a victim of narcissistic relatives. I only knew this because one of her potential employers called me. She'd listed me as a reference, probably hoping I wouldn't sabotage a job opportunity. The employer asked standard questions about her work ethic and reliability. I stuck to facts. She'd been terminated from her previous nursing position. She had outstanding debts to family members, and I couldn't recommend her for a position of trust. The job offer was rescinded. Linda sent me a scathing email about how I was destroying her life, preventing her from earning money to pay us back. The circular logic was astounding. She couldn't pay us because we wouldn't let her scam others. As months passed, Linda's payments became sporadic. She'd miss one, make a partial payment the next month, always with elaborate excuses. We documented everything, but held off on sending the letter to her current employer, partly out of compassion, partly because we knew it would escalate things further. The family dynamics had shifted permanently. Gatherings were smaller, some members choosing to avoid drama by staying away. Trust, once broken, had created ripple effects throughout our relationships. We were more cautious with each other, less willing to ask for or offer help. I started seeing a therapist to deal with the stress and guilt. Had I handled things correctly? Could I have found a way to get justice without destroying family bonds? The therapist helped me understand that Linda's choices had created this situation, not my response to them. During one session, I realized something important. Linda had stolen more than money. She'd stolen our family's innocence, our ability to trust freely, our assumption that family meant safety. The $5,000 was nothing compared to that loss. But we'd also gained something. We'd learned to set boundaries, to verify before trusting, to support each other through difficult times. The family members who'd stuck together through this ordeal had grown closer, bonded by shared experience and mutual protection. Linda continued her pattern of partial payments and broken promises. She'd found new communities online, people who didn't know her history, and was likely running smaller scams we couldn't track. But within our family, her power was broken. The last family gathering I attended before writing this was my grandmother's 75th birthday. Linda wasn't invited, a decision that would have been unthinkable 2 years earlier. As we celebrated, I noticed the absence, the Linda-shaped hole in our family photos. But I also noticed the peace. No one was watching their wallet. No one was dreading a sob story. No one was wondering if they were being manipulated. We'd paid a high price for that peace, but it was worth it. Linda had taught us valuable lessons about trust, boundaries, and the difference between helping family and enabling a predator. Her $5,000 Hawaiian vacation had indeed become the most expensive trip she ever took, costing her a family who'd loved her unconditionally. As I looked around at my relatives, sharing stories and laughter without the underlying tension that had characterized our gatherings for years, I realized we'd survived. We were different, perhaps more cautious, but we were still a family. The money was never really the point. It was about protecting each other from someone who'd seen our love as weakness. Linda was still out there, probably running new scams on new victims, but she'd never again have power over us. We'd learned that family isn't about blind loyalty or keeping score. It's about mutual respect, honest communication, and the courage to stand up to those who would exploit our bonds. Linda had forced us to learn those lessons the hard way, but learn them we did. The morning after my grandmother's birthday party, I woke up to 17 missed calls from Linda. My first instinct was to ignore them, but something felt different. The voicemails weren't angry or manipulative. They were panicked. I listened to the first one. Linda's voice was shaking as she explained that her new employer had received an anonymous letter detailing her history with our family. She'd been let go that morning, escorted out by security. The letter hadn't come from any of us. Marcus called while I was still processing this. His voice was tight with concern as he explained that Linda had shown up at his workplace, demanding to know why we'd broken our agreement. Security had removed her when she'd refused to leave. She'd been screaming about how we'd destroyed her life after she'd been making payments. I checked our family group chat. No one had sent anything to Linda's employer. We'd all stuck to our agreement, despite her missed payments and harassment. Someone else had taken action. The answer came from an unexpected source. Tom, Linda's ex-boyfriend from church, reached out through Facebook. He'd been doing his own investigation after their breakup and discovered Linda had scammed several other church members. Small amounts, nothing like what she'd taken from family, but enough to establish a pattern. He'd warned her current employer after learning she'd been hired to handle cash deposits. Linda's world was collapsing, but not because of us. Her own patterns had caught up with her. Tom had connected with 3 other people she'd borrowed money from at church. They'd compared notes just like we had and realized they'd been played. That afternoon, Linda showed up at my apartment again. This time I didn't answer. I watched through the peephole as she pounded on the door, alternating between threats and pleas. My neighbor eventually called building security, and they escorted her out. She tried Marcus next, then Kesha. We'd all agreed not to engage, but Linda was escalating in ways that worried us. Destiny reported that Linda had been banned from the church after attempting to confront Tom during Sunday service. She'd accused him of stalking and harassment in front of the entire congregation. The situation reached a breaking point when Linda showed up at my workplace. I was in a meeting when reception called to say my aunt was in the lobby, refusing to leave without seeing me. My boss, aware of the family situation, offered to have security remove her, but I decided to face her. I found Linda in the lobby, looking nothing like the polished woman who'd vacationed in Hawaii on my money. Her clothes were wrinkled, her hair unkempt, her eyes wild with desperation. She started talking the moment she saw me, words tumbling out about conspiracy, persecution, how everyone had turned against her. I kept my voice calm and told her she needed to leave, or I'd call security. That's when she pulled out her phone and showed me something that made my blood run cold. Screenshots of messages from someone claiming to be me, threatening to ruin her life, demanding she pay back double what she owed. The messages were vicious, disturbing, nothing I would ever write. Someone was impersonating me, escalating the situation beyond anything we'd planned. I told Linda these weren't from me, but she didn't believe it. Why would she? Trust between us was non-existent. Security arrived and escorted her out while she screamed about lawsuits and revenge. Back in my office, I immediately called an emergency family meeting. We needed to figure out who was targeting Linda using my name. The messages she'd shown me were dated over the past week, sent from an email address similar to mine, but with one letter different. Destiny did some digging and discovered multiple fake social media accounts using our names, all created recently. Someone was systematically impersonating family members to harass Linda. But who would do this and why? The answer came from an unexpected place. My sister had been quiet during our video call, but finally spoke up. She'd been getting coffee near Linda's old apartment when she'd overheard a conversation. Linda's former roommate, someone we'd never considered, was bragging about teaching that scammer a lesson. It turned out Linda had stiffed her roommate on 3 months of rent before moving out. The roommate had found our Facebook posts about Linda's scams and decided to take her own revenge. She'd been the one sending anonymous tips to employers, creating fake accounts, escalating the harassment beyond anything we'd done. We were caught in an impossible situation. We couldn't defend Linda without undermining our own position. But we couldn't let someone use our names to harass her either. After much debate, I decided to send Linda one final message, explaining about the impersonation and suggesting she file a police report about the harassment. Linda's response was predictable. She didn't believe us, thought it was another manipulation tactic. She was convinced we were all working together to destroy her. The paranoia had completely taken over. 2 weeks later, things took another turn. The roommate's harassment campaign had attracted attention from other people Linda had scammed over the years. A former coworker she'd borrowed money from, a neighbor she'd convinced to pay for car repairs, even someone from an online support group she'd manipulated. They'd formed their own group, sharing stories and warning others. Unlike our family approach of seeking repayment, they seemed focused on pure revenge. They posted Linda's photo in local community groups with warnings. They contacted every employer in town. They made sure Linda couldn't run the same scams anywhere in our area. I felt sick watching it unfold. Yes, Linda had stolen from us, manipulated us, threatened us. But this public destruction went beyond justice. It veered into cruelty. My grandmother was especially disturbed. Despite everything, Linda was still family. We made a difficult decision. I contacted the roommate directly, explaining that while we understood her anger, using our names for harassment was illegal. We wouldn't protect Linda, but we wouldn't let someone impersonate us either. The fake accounts disappeared within days. But the damage was done. Linda had become unemployable in our town. Her reputation was destroyed beyond repair. The other victims continued their campaign without using our names, and we had no control over that. A month passed with no word from Linda. Her payments had stopped completely. We heard through distant relatives that she'd moved in with a friend 2 towns over, trying to start fresh where nobody knew her history. Part of me hoped she'd learned something, but I doubted it. People like Linda didn't change. They just found new hunting grounds. Then came the call that changed everything. It was from a hospital 2 hours away. Linda had been in a car accident. A serious one. She'd listed my grandmother as her emergency contact. Despite everything, my grandmother insisted on going. I drove her. We found Linda in the ICU, unconscious and badly injured. The doctor explained she'd been hit by a drunk driver while driving for a food delivery service, trying to make money the honest way. The irony wasn't lost on me. Over the next week, family members slowly trickled in to visit. Old wounds were still raw, but seeing Linda vulnerable and broken stirred something in all of us. Not forgiveness exactly, but a recognition of shared humanity. Linda woke up on the 5th day. The first person she saw was my grandmother, holding her hand. I watched from the doorway as Linda broke down completely. Not the manipulative tears we'd seen before, but genuine anguish. She apologized over and over, not asking for anything, just pouring out years of self-hatred and shame. The medical bills would be covered by the drunk driver's insurance, but Linda faced months of recovery. She had nowhere to go, no one to help her. The family was split on what to do. Some felt she'd gotten what she deserved. Others, led by my grandmother, argued for compassion. We reached a compromise. Linda could stay in my grandmother's spare room during recovery, but under strict conditions. No access to money or credit cards, no unsupervised interactions with family members, regular check-ins with a social worker. It wasn't trust, it was supervised mercy. The arrangement was tense at first. Linda kept to herself, going to physical therapy and counseling appointments my grandmother drove her to. She started working remotely for a data entry company, earning minimum wage, but contributing what she could to groceries. Slowly things shifted. Linda began attending addiction support meetings, even though she'd never had substance issues. She said the lying and manipulation had been its own addiction. She worked through workbooks about financial responsibility and rebuilding trust. 6 months into her recovery, Linda made an announcement at a family dinner. She'd saved enough to rent a room across town. She showed us her budget, her payment plan to continue reimbursing what she owed, her work schedule. She wasn't asking for help, just showing us she was trying. Some family members remained skeptical. Others saw genuine change. I fell somewhere in between. The Linda who'd scammed us for Hawaii still existed somewhere inside this seemingly reformed woman. But the effort appeared real. She moved out on a rainy Thursday. My grandmother cried, worried about Linda being alone. But Linda needed to prove she could stand on her own feet without manipulating anyone. She left with a single suitcase and a bus pass, determined to rebuild from nothing. I saw her occasionally around town after that. Working at the grocery store, waiting at the bus stop, walking to her support meetings. She'd wave but never approach, respecting the boundaries we'd established. The family updates came through my grandmother, who Linda called weekly. A year after the accident, Linda had paid back another $3,000. Not through manipulation or schemes but through honest work. She'd taken a second job cleaning offices at night. Her life was hard, grinding. Nothing like the comfortable existence she built on our money. At Thanksgiving, my grandmother invited Linda to dinner. The table was divided on whether she should come. In the end, she joined us for dessert only, sitting quietly at the end of the table. She didn't try to charm anyone or make excuses. She simply thanked us for the invitation and left early. Marcus told me later that Linda had reached out to apologize personally to each family member she'd wronged, not asking for forgiveness or trying to rebuild relationships, just acknowledging the harm she'd caused. Some accepted her apology. Others, like Uncle Ray, refused to even meet with her. The payments continued steadily. Linda never missed one after moving out. She'd even started paying back people outside the family. The church members and co-workers she'd scammed. It would take years to clear all her debts, but she seemed committed to trying. I ran into Tom at the hardware store one weekend. He mentioned that Linda had sent him a letter taking full responsibility for her deception. She'd included a money order for what she'd borrowed, though he'd never asked for repayment. He donated it to the church's emergency fund. As I write this, it's been 2 years since that Hawaii trip that started everything. Linda has paid back $7,000 of the $15,000 she owes our family. She lives in a tiny apartment, works 2 jobs, and attends support meetings religiously. She's never asked for anything beyond that initial recovery period at my grandmother's house. The family remains divided about her. Some believe people can change and point to Linda's consistent efforts. Others, myself included, wait for the other shoe to drop. Trust, once shattered, doesn't rebuild easily. Maybe it never fully returns. My grandmother passed away last month. At the funeral, Linda sat in the back row, tears streaming down her face. She'd lost the one family member who'd never given up on her. After the service, she approached me with an envelope. Inside was $500, her regular payment, and a note. She was increasing her payments to $750 monthly, wanting to clear her debts faster. She'd taken a 3rd job, she wrote, because she wanted to honor my grandmother's faith in her. I watched Linda walk away from the cemetery, catching the bus back to her apartment. She looked older, worn down by hard work and harder choices. The confident scammer who'd sipped cocktails in Hawaii was gone, replaced by someone trying desperately to earn redemption. Whether she'll succeed, I don't know. Whether the family will ever fully accept her back, I can't say. But Linda learned the hardest lesson possible. When you betray family trust for a vacation in paradise, you might spend the rest of your life in a kind of purgatory, forever trying to prove you're worthy of the love you threw away. The money continues to trickle in, each payment a small step toward reconciliation, or at least resolution. Linda's $5,000 Hawaiian vacation will end up costing her decades of hard labor and social exile. She pays the price every day, not just in dollars but in loneliness and regret. As for me, I drive my car, the one I bought with the money she eventually repaid. And sometimes think about second chances and the true price of betrayal. Linda taught our family valuable lessons about trust and boundaries. But maybe she's teaching us something else now. About redemption and the long, difficult road back from our worst mistakes. Only time will tell if Linda's transformation is real, or just another long con. But for now, the payments arrive monthly. This whole journey, it changed me. Changed us. So I have to ask you, after hearing all of this, what would you have done? Could you ever truly forgive someone who betrayed you like this? Tell me what you think, I really want to know.